The sun was just beginning to peek over the rooftops of the quiet suburban neighborhood, spilling golden light over the neat lawns and tree-lined streets. Birds chirped lazily, and the occasional car hummed past, cutting through the calm morning. For most, it was the start of a typical day, but for Sarah Matthews, the morning felt different. There was a tension in the air she couldn't quite place, an almost imperceptible heaviness that pressed on her chest. She glanced down at her 2-year-old son, Ethan, who clutched his favorite stuffed bear, eyes wide and curious, and felt a mix of love and anxiety. Today was no ordinary day. It was the day she would testify in court against a man who had turned her life upside down. Sarah moved through her small kitchen with mechanical precision. She poured coffee into her favorite mug, its floral design chipped from years of use. Ethan wandered at her feet, tiny fingers tracing the edges of the cabinets as if exploring the world for the first time. Normally, mornings with Ethan were chaotic, filled with spilled cereal and tantrums over shoes or breakfast choices. But today, there was an almost eerie calm. Ethan seemed unusually quiet, glancing around as though he could sense something invisible to the adult eye. Sarah dismissed it with a smile, chalking it up to toddler curiosity, yet a subtle unease lingered in her mind. The neighborhood had been on edge for weeks. Burglars had struck 3 houses in the past month, leaving neighbors whispering behind closed doors, security systems installed hastily, and children being warned not to wander alone. Sarah's own house had been spared, yet the sense of vulnerability lingered like a shadow over everything. She couldn't shake the memory of the night of the break in, the sharp creak of floorboards, the shadowy figure darting past the hallway, the brief, terrifying glimpse of a face she couldn't fully place. That memory had brought her here, to this courthouse, where she would confront the man she now knew as Tommy Green. Ethan, oblivious to the weight of the day, toddled toward the living room window and pointed outside. "Mommy, look!" he exclaimed in his tiny, breathless voice. Sarah knelt beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I see him, sweetie," she said softly, though she wasn't sure what he was pointing at. The street appeared empty, sun glinting off parked cars, nothing unusual at all. Yet Ethan's insistence lingered, his little finger frozen in the air, as though signaling someone or something. Sarah chuckled nervously, shaking her head. "You're too small to know, Ethan," she murmured, picking him up and settling him onto her hip. Dressing for court had been another challenge. Sarah chose a navy blouse and slacks, aiming for neatness and respectability without appearing stiff. Ethan fussed with the buttons on his tiny shirt, tugging at his socks in protest. She coaxed him patiently, whispering gentle reassurances. Her mind, however, drifted continually to the court proceedings. How would it feel to sit across from Tommy Green, the man she had glimpsed only briefly that night, but whose presence had left a mark on her memory? Could she remember enough to convince the jury? Could she face him without faltering? Breakfast was a hurried affair. A slice of toast for Sarah, a bowl of oatmeal for Ethan. He played with his spoon more than he ate, dropping clumps of oatmeal onto the floor. Sarah sighed, wiping his face with a damp cloth. Even in these ordinary moments, a sense of foreboding gnawed at her. Something about the day felt like a turning point, though she couldn't articulate why. She glanced at the clock and realized it was almost time to leave. Court would start soon, and she needed to be composed, strong, ready to testify. By 8:30 a.m., Sarah was buckling Ethan into his car seat, double-checking the straps while he babbled excitedly about the trees passing by. He pointed at a mailbox across the street, then at a neighbor's dog, his eyes sparkling with the pure curiosity only a toddler possessed. Sarah smiled, her heart aching with a mixture of pride and anxiety. She whispered a quick prayer, hoping she could navigate the day without letting fear take over. The short drive to the courthouse was filled with Ethan's chatter and Sarah's quiet, tense thoughts. Each stoplight felt like a test of her patience. Each passing car a reminder that life could be unpredictable. Arriving at the courthouse, Sarah parked and gathered Ethan from his car seat, holding his hand as they walked toward the entrance. The building loomed above them, its stone facade cold and intimidating. The buzz of activity inside was immediate. People hurried past in suits. Reporters jostled for position, and security officers directed visitors with practiced efficiency. Ethan clung to Sarah's hand, tiny fingers gripping her palm with surprising strength. He glanced around, pointing now at a man in uniform, Officer Ramirez, leading a large German Shepherd Max, whose presence exuded calm authority. Ethan's gaze lingered, a soft "whoa" escaping his lips. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Something about the dog was arresting, not frightening, but uncanny in its intensity. Max's ears twitched as he scanned the room, nostrils flaring, tail poised. Sarah tried to focus on what she needed to do: testify, provide her account, and ensure justice was served. But Ethan's fixation on the dog made her pause. He pointed again, small finger straight and deliberate. "Mommy, him," he said, eyes wide. Sarah frowned. It was probably nothing, just toddler curiosity, she reassured herself. And yet, a flicker of recognition crossed Max's face as he subtly moved toward the direction Ethan had indicated. Inside, the courtroom itself buzzed with anticipation. Reporters were setting up cameras, lawyers whispered urgently, and the accused, Tommy Green, sat in the defendant's chair, expression unreadable. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was the man she had glimpsed that terrifying night. Every detail she had tried to forget: the shadowed figure, the glint of his watch, the nervous shuffle, came rushing back. She clutched Ethan closer, feeling the weight of responsibility. She had to be precise, clear, and unwavering. The thought that her toddler might play some role, she laughed nervously to herself, seemed absurd, yet a nagging feeling in her chest told her the day might not unfold as she expected. As the court session was called to order, Sarah took a deep breath, adjusting Ethan on her lap. The gavel sounded, echoing through the high ceiling's chamber. She glanced at Officer Ramirez and Max again, noting the dog's calm, attentive posture. Ethan, too, was unusually still, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Sarah whispered a gentle promise to herself. She would face this, testify truthfully, and let the evidence speak. Little did she know, her son's instinct, pure and unfiltered, was about to intersect with trained canine intuition in a way no one could have predicted. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Outside, the suburban neighborhood continued its quiet routines, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She adjusted Ethan on her lap once more, trying to calm both herself and the boy. Somewhere deep down, she sensed that today, ordinary people herself, her toddler, and a police dog would do something extraordinary. And just like that, the quiet tension of a strange morning shifted toward a sense of impending revelation, a chain of events that would captivate everyone in the room and beyond. The courthouse loomed like a stone sentinel as Sarah and Ethan approached its towering doors. The morning air, once calm and sun-drenched, now felt charged, almost electric, as if anticipating the drama inside. Sarah held Ethan's hand tightly. Tiny fingers curled around hers with surprising strength. He looked up at her, eyes wide, a mixture of curiosity and the strange seriousness toddlers sometimes wear when they sense something adults cannot. She squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "It's okay, Ethan. Just stay with me." Inside, the building was a whirlwind of activity. Security guards scanned badges and directed visitors with practiced precision, the clack of shoes on polished marble echoing in the cavernous hallways. Sarah maneuvered through the crowd, keeping Ethan close, trying to steady herself. The air smelled faintly of paper, polish, and anticipation. Around them, reporters hustled, cameras balanced on shoulders, microphones held high, hungry for the smallest detail that could make a headline. The courtroom itself was a study in formality. Rows of polished wooden benches, high ceilings adorned with intricate moldings, and a commanding judge's bench at the far end. The room seemed to amplify every movement, every whispered conversation. Sarah's eyes darted across the space. The jury had begun filing in, murmuring quietly among themselves, each member carrying expressions of curiosity and focus. The accused, Tommy Green, was already seated, flanked by his defense attorney, posture rigid and unreadable. Sarah's heart quickened. This was the man she had seen that night, his face a shadowy imprint in her memory, features blurred but undeniably human. Then there was Officer Ramirez and his canine partner, Max, who entered with a quiet authority. Max's coat gleamed in the soft courtroom light, a powerful German shepherd exuding alertness and discipline. He moved with fluid precision, ears twitching, nose flicking subtly as he scanned the room. Ethan's eyes widened, drawn to the animal as if recognizing something important. He pointed, his tiny finger trembling slightly, and whispered, "Him." Sarah froze, her chest tightening. It was impossible, she thought, for a toddler to sense anything significant in a courtroom full of strangers. Yet the dog's reaction mirrored Ethan's gesture. Max stiffened, head tilting slightly, gaze locking in the same direction. The judge called the session to order with a sharp knock of the gavel. "All rise," he intoned, his voice resonant and commanding. Sarah adjusted Ethan on her lap, trying to calm him and herself. The courtroom fell silent, a hush so deep that the soft rustle of papers seemed deafening. Reporters lowered their cameras, intrigued by the unusual pairing of Toddler and K9. Even Tommy Green's defense attorney noticed the subtle tension, leaning closer to whisper a quiet warning to his client. Sarah's mind raced, memories from the night of the burglary surfacing, unbidden footsteps, shadows, the glint of a wristwatch, the scent of cologne that lingered long after he fled. When the prosecutor called her to the stand, Sarah's legs shook slightly. She rose, clutching her notes, while Ethan clung to her side, babbling softly to himself, as if comforting her. Officer Ramirez nodded briefly, giving Max a subtle signal to remain calm but vigilant. The dog sat obediently, though its eyes never left Tommy Green. Sarah felt an odd comfort in that silent presence. It was almost as though she wasn't alone in recalling the terrifying night. Max was there, steady, attuned, ready to respond. Taking her oath, Sarah's voice wavered at first, then grew steady. She described the evening in detail, the shadow moving along the hallway, the abrupt noise that startled her, the fleeting glimpse of a man's face. She paused, taking a deep breath, trying to reconstruct the events with accuracy, aware that the jury was scrutinizing every word. Her eyes flicked down to Ethan, who had grown quiet, his gaze fixed in the same direction he had pointed earlier. "Mommy, him," he murmured again. Sarah frowned, glancing at Officer Ramirez. The veteran cop's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Max's stance had shifted slightly, ears forward, muscles tense. Something was unfolding that no one could have anticipated. Sarah's testimony continued, recalling minute details, the order of events, the items the burglar had touched, the direction he had fled. She described the fear that gripped her, the racing of her heart, the helplessness she had felt as a witness and a victim. The jury listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances, trying to piece together the story. Ethan's tiny voice punctuated her narrative every so often, and Max is silent. Controlled movements mirrored each of Ethan's gestures, creating a subtle, almost uncanny connection that seemed to suggest the toddler and dog were in perfect alignment. The defense attempted to undermine her credibility. "Are you sure this is the man?" Tommy Green's lawyer asked sharply. "You only saw him for a moment. How can you be certain?" Sarah felt a pang of doubt. Could she truly remember? The courtroom seemed to close in, the weight of expectation pressing down. But then Ethan raised his finger again, pointing firmly at Tommy Green. Max responded instantly, alerting slightly, the precision of the dog's reaction undeniable. The jury murmured quietly. The synergy between Toddler and K9 was impossible to ignore. For a moment, the courtroom seemed suspended in disbelief. A toddler's instinct and a K9's trained senses converged, forming a silent testimony that no words could convey. Sarah's own memories sharpened. Details she had overlooked rushing back. The smell of leather gloves, the shuffle of worn shoes, the nervous glance over her shoulder. Each flashback strengthened her conviction. She realized that Ethan's pointing was more than a random gesture. It was a trigger, a bridge between her fragmented recollections and the truth that lay hidden in her subconscious. Officer Ramirez, maintaining strict control over Max, subtly guided the dog closer to the indicated spot, careful not to disrupt the proceedings. Max's behavior was calm but precise. His trained instincts confirmed the focus Ethan had unwittingly provided. Reporters leaned forward, capturing every moment. The courtroom's atmosphere was electric, an unusual combination of tension, awe, and disbelief. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the unexpected alliance of toddler intuition and canine precision. It was a quiet reminder that sometimes justice could manifest in forms no one anticipated. As Sarah concluded her testimony, she felt an odd sense of relief. She had spoken truthfully, recalled every detail she could, and left the rest to the system. But the lingering feeling of astonishment came from Ethan and Max, the two small yet powerful forces that had commanded attention without a single word spoken. Sarah cradled her son gently, whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're so brave." Ethan smiled innocently, unaware of the extraordinary role he had just played. Outside the courtroom doors, life continued, oblivious to the drama, but inside, a story was unfolding that would captivate everyone who witnessed it. The morning stretched on, the tension giving way to the anticipation of cross-examination and further canine-assisted observation. Sarah noticed reporters whispering among themselves, exchanging incredulous glances. The court staff moved efficiently, but the room hummed with unspoken excitement. The combination of toddler instinct, canine training, and human memory created a unique energy that made everyone realize they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. For Sarah, the day was no longer just about facing a criminal. It was about witnessing the improbable ways in which truth could reveal itself. As the gavel signaled the end of the preliminary proceedings, Sarah settled Ethan back on her lap. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing of her heart. Max remained vigilant, standing as a silent guardian of the courtroom. Ethan leaned against her, softly murmuring about the dog again. "Him, Mommy?" Sarah smiled weakly, a shiver running down her spine. Something told her that the day was far from over, that this small, unexpected connection between a toddler and a trained police dog would shape the outcome in ways no one could predict. The stage was set, and the tension was palpable. Justice, she realized, had found allies in the most unlikely of forms. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation as Sarah Matthews approached the witness stand. Her palms were damp, her heart pounding, and Ethan clutched her skirt tightly, his tiny fingers wrapping around the fabric with the strength of someone older than his age. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, and glanced toward the jury. Their eyes were fixed on her, silent but intense, absorbing every detail. She had rehearsed this testimony in her mind countless times, but nothing could fully prepare her for the reality of facing the man who had shattered the sense of security in her home. Tommy Green sat in the defendant's chair, expression unreadable, but eyes flicking toward her intermittently. He was calm, almost too calm, as though confident that the fleeting nature of her memory and the absence of concrete evidence would work in his favor. His lawyer whispered under his breath, probably rehearsing the questions meant to trip her up, to cast doubt on her recollection. But Sarah knew the truth. Her memory was clearer than she had realized, sharpened now by the fear she had felt that night and by the uncanny presence of her son. Ethan. Officer Ramirez stood nearby, Max obediently at his side. The canine's ears twitched, nose subtly sniffing the air, tail still, eyes locked on the room. Sarah drew a deep breath and began recounting the events of the burglary. Her voice wavered initially, tremulous with emotion. She described the sharp creak of the floorboards, the sudden rustle of the curtains, the shadow moving along the hallway. Every word was carefully chosen, every detail painstakingly recalled. The jury leaned forward, silent, hanging on each description, while Ethan squirmed slightly on her lap, his attention shifting between his mother and the imposing figure of Max. Then it happened. Ethan, sitting cross-legged on Sarah's lap, squinted toward the front of the courtroom and pointed with a small, deliberate finger. Him, he exclaimed in a clear, insistent voice. Heads turned, and a ripple of laughter moved through the room. Surely, they thought, this was just a toddler playing at mimicry. But Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Officer Ramirez, who subtly inclined his head toward Max. The dog stiffened instantly, ears forward, body tense, gaze fixed precisely on the direction Ethan had indicated. It was an impossible alignment, a moment that seemed to freeze time in the room. The courtroom fell silent. The reporters stopped typing, cameras held in mid-air, capturing the scene. The judge raised his eyebrows, interest piqued. "Excuse me," he said carefully, his voice calm but carrying authority. "Is the child indicating something specific?" Sarah nodded slowly, unsure herself. I think he's pointing at him," she whispered, referring to Tommy Green. The judge studied Ethan briefly, then at the canine, Max, whose alert posture remained unwavering. A subtle nod from Officer Ramirez confirmed what no one wanted to dismiss outright. There was something significant in this child's gesture. Sarah took another deep breath, steadying herself. She continued her testimony, now more confident, describing the minute details of the burglar's appearance, the worn shoes, the faded hoodie, the glint of a silver watch on his wrist. Each recollection seemed to sharpen as Ethan pointed repeatedly, tiny voice breaking the silence with emphatic, Him, Mommy." Max's response never wavered. The dog's instincts, honed over years of training, mirrored Ethan's tiny finger with eerie precision. The synergy between toddler intuition and canine expertise created a tension so palpable that even the defense paused, momentarily speechless. The prosecutor seized the moment, leaning forward slightly. "Would you please tell the court what your son is doing?" she asked, her voice controlled but laced with intrigue. Sarah swallowed, trying to articulate the impossible. He's pointing at the man I saw that night. I didn't think it meant anything at first, but the dog. Max, he reacted exactly the way he's trained to when detecting someone associated with a crime. The courtroom murmured softly. Even the jury exchanged glances, the combination of child and dog forming a tableau that was difficult to dismiss. Tommy Green's defense attorney rose quickly, face tight with concern. "Your Honor, we cannot allow a toddler's pointing to be considered evidence," he said firmly, attempting to regain control. "It's circumstantial at best and inadmissible as factual testimony." The judge nodded slowly, listening carefully. "I understand your objection," he replied. "But canine responses are a recognized form of evidence, and the court will consider this child's behavior only in context with the trained." K-9's reaction, and the witness's testimony. The defense sank slightly into their seats, realizing that the synergy of human recollection, toddler instinct, and K-9 training was creating a unique and compelling narrative. Sarah's voice grew stronger, steadier with each passing moment. She described how the man had moved through her living room, how he had fumbled with items on the shelf, and the fear that had gripped her chest as she watched from behind a partially closed door. Ethan's pointing seemed to guide her memory, unlocking details she had not consciously remembered before. The jury listened, captivated. Max's subtle, precise movements only amplified the sense of authenticity and urgency. The room was silent except for Sarah's steady recounting and the occasional squeak of Ethan's tiny voice insisting, "Him! Him!" A flashback seemed to hit Sarah, unbidden. She could see, vividly, the glint of the man's watch in the dim hallway light, the scent of his cologne lingering like smoke, the nervous shuffle of his worn shoes. Each image aligned perfectly with what Ethan had just indicated. The courtroom became a stage for something extraordinary, a toddler's instinct, a mother's memory, and K-9's trained senses, all converging in real time. Reporters furiously scribbled notes. Cameras continued to click, capturing the unfolding drama. Every person present felt it. This was no ordinary testimony. Max remained calm but precise. Officer Ramirez subtly directed him toward Tommy Green's belongings without breaking the dog's line of focus. The K-9 sniffed, hesitated, and then gave a controlled alert, sitting in place and staring. Sarah's stomach knotted. The combination of Ethan's pointing and Max's response made the impossible feel real. Even the judge seemed intrigued, leaning slightly forward. This child, this tiny, unassuming boy, and this dog, trained meticulously, were shaping the courtroom narrative in ways no one could have predicted. The defense tried again, questioning Sarah's memory and suggesting that a toddler's pointing was coincidental. But Sarah had grown confident. She recounted every sensory detail she had noticed that night, each one validated by Ethan's repeated insistence and Max's K-9 instincts. The jury appeared captivated, leaning in, whispering among themselves, just enough to betray curiosity without disrupting the proceedings. The courtroom was electric, suspense hanging thickly in the air. Everyone felt the gravity of what was unfolding, an unusual yet undeniable alignment of human perception and trained instinct. Finally, Sarah concluded her testimony. She felt a wave of exhaustion, relief, and tension all at once. Ethan, still on her lap, rubbed his eyes sleepily, but seemed satisfied, as though his part in the unfolding events had been acknowledged. Max returned to Officer Ramirez's side, calm but alert, the silent witness to an extraordinary day. The judge allowed a brief recess, giving everyone a moment to process what they had witnessed. Outside the stand, whispers circulated. Sarah realized that a toddler's intuition, combined with a K-9's trained abilities, had turned a routine testimony into an extraordinary and potentially case-defining event. Sarah cradled Ethan gently, murmuring, "You were amazing, baby." He smiled sleepily, oblivious to the attention he had drawn. Max leaned slightly against Ramirez, who gave a small nod of approval. The courtroom was now aware of something rare and astonishing, the alignment of instinct and training, innocence and expertise, had created a moment that would shape the trial's outcome. Sarah knew the day was far from over, but for now, the impossible had happened. Her testimony, guided by her son and confirmed by a K-9, had captured everyone's attention and set the stage for the extraordinary events to come. The courtroom was thick with an almost tangible anticipation. Every eye drawn toward the witness stand where Sarah Matthews sat, Ethan perched on her lap, and the imposing figure of Officer Ramirez with his K-9 Max silently observing. The moment Ethan had pointed at Tommy Green seemed to have frozen the room in awe. Reporters whispered to one another. Jurors leaned forward, and even some courtroom staff paused, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The small boy's tiny finger had transformed into a powerful signal, a connection between the chaos of a crime and the clarity of instinct, and no one could ignore it. Ethan's pointing became insistent. Him, Mommy," he squeaked, the urgency in his voice startling everyone who heard it. Sarah's chest tightened. She had never seen him behave like this. There was no mischief, no playfulness, just an eerie focus that made her shiver. Officer Ramirez watched carefully, noting every gesture, every squeak, and the subtle tension in Max's body. The dog's ears perked, nose twitching, tail stiff but controlled, muscles coiled as if ready to act. Ethan's seemingly simple gesture was now taking on a life of its own, commanding the attention of everyone in the courtroom. Sarah tried to calm Ethan, gently rubbing his back and whispering reassurances. "It's okay, baby. Just stay here with Mommy," she murmured. But Ethan refused to be distracted. He kept pointing, eyes locked on Tommy Green, as though some invisible force was guiding him. Each time he pointed, Max reacted, shifting slightly, lowering his head, or subtly alerting to the same direction. The synergy between Toddler and K9 was uncanny, almost supernatural in its precision. Every movement of Ethan seemed amplified by the dog's trained instincts, creating a tension in the room that was impossible to ignore. The jurors whispered among themselves. One leaned to the person beside him, whispering, "Is that a coincidence?" Another shook his head slightly, incredulous. Even the judge, a man accustomed to witnessing extraordinary testimony, raised an eyebrow and leaned forward in his chair. This was no ordinary courtroom scene. A toddler's instinct, paired with a police dog's trained reactions, was guiding the trial in unexpected directions. The air was electric, charged with suspense, as though everyone present sensed the unfolding of something beyond ordinary comprehension. Sarah felt a mix of pride, awe, and anxiety. Ethan was only 2 years old, incapable of understanding the gravity of the courtroom or the consequences of pointing at a man who might be guilty of multiple crimes. Yet his instinctive gesture was revealing truths she hadn't fully remembered. Memories long buried began surfacing tiny details from the night of the burglary. The scuff of shoes against the hallway floor, the glint of a silver watch, the peculiar scent of cologne. Each recollection aligned perfectly with Ethan's pointed finger, reinforcing what she already suspected, but hadn't been able to articulate. The prosecutor rose slightly from her seat, careful not to break courtroom decorum. "Your Honor," she said softly, "the child's gesture, combined with the dog's trained behavior, is significant. It confirms the witness's identification in a manner consistent with the evidence we have collected." The defense lawyer immediately rose, objection ready, attempting to minimize the impact of the toddler's actions. "Your Honor, we cannot allow a 2-year-old's pointing to influence the jury. It is circumstantial and unreliable." But the judge, already intrigued by the scene before him, gestured for calm. "The court will consider this in the context of the total evidence," he said, voice steady but firm, allowing the unfolding of events to continue. Ethan pointed again, his small arm trembling slightly from the effort. "Him," he repeated, louder this time. Sarah's heart pounded. She felt a mixture of fear and wonder, realizing that her son's instincts were directing attention in a way she had never imagined possible. Max responded instantly, alerting subtly but unmistakably toward the defendant. The dog's behavior was measured, controlled, yet it carried an undeniable authority. It was a silent, powerful statement. The instinct of a child and the training of a K9 could converge in a manner no human alone could replicate. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Even reporters, used to dramatic testimonies, were captivated. One quietly whispered to another, I've never seen anything like this. Another clicked the camera repeatedly, capturing every moment of the small boy pointing, the dog alert, and the mother's tense but determined posture. The defense lawyer frowned, realizing that conventional arguments might not counter this phenomenon. The jury, too, leaned forward, drawn in by the extraordinary scene. What began as a routine testimony had transformed into a spectacle of intuition and instinct, captivating every person present. Sarah spoke again, carefully reconstructing the night of the burglary. She described the sounds, the shadows, the fleeting glimpse of a man she barely recognized, but whose presence haunted her memory. Each detail she recounted seemed to trigger a response from Ethan, who pointed in affirmation, as though confirming her recollection. Max's alert behavior mirrored Ethan's gestures precisely, reinforcing the veracity of Sarah's statements. It was a silent validation, an alignment of instinct, training, and memory that made the courtroom realize this was no ordinary testimony. A sudden flashback struck Sarah vividly. She could see the hallway clearly, the faint outline of Tommy Green moving past, the shuffle of his shoes, the tense, hurried movements as he collected items from her home. She remembered the sharp sound of a window latch, the fleeting glint of a watch, the smell of leather gloves. Each detail fell into place with Ethan's repeated pointing and Max's precise reactions. Sarah felt a surge of confidence. The memories, once fragmented, were now validated in real time by the innocent insight of a toddler and the trained instincts of a canine. The defense lawyer rose again, clearly flustered, attempting to cast doubt. "Objection, Your Honor. This is circumstantial. A child's pointing cannot be relied upon as credible evidence." But the judge shook his head slowly. "The court will weigh all evidence, including expert testimony on canine behavior and witness recollection. The child's actions may be considered as part of the context, not in isolation." The room hushed again, tension crackling like electricity. The extraordinary interplay between toddler and dog had effectively changed the dynamics of the courtroom. Sarah continued, each word deliberate, her confidence growing. She described how she had initially doubted her memory, how fear had blurred the details that Ethan was now clarifying. Each time he pointed, Max confirmed the indication through precise, trained behavior. The jurors were captivated, leaning in as though trying to absorb every detail. The reporters clicked their cameras, and even courtroom staff exchanged glances of disbelief. It was a unique moment, one that blurred the lines between innocence, instinct, and trained expertise. By now, the courtroom seemed suspended in awe. Ethan, small and unassuming, was the center of attention, yet unaware of the weight of his actions. Max, disciplined and alert, stood as the silent enforcer of truth. Sarah realized the extraordinary circumstances she was witnessing. The pure intuition of a toddler, when validated by a trained canine and framed by her memory, was creating a force no one could ignore. The synergy was undeniable, powerful, and mesmerizing. The judge allowed a brief pause for everyone to process the unusual events. Sarah adjusted Ethan on her lap, murmuring, "You're doing so well, baby. I'm so proud of you." Ethan blinked slowly, content and innocent, still pointing faintly toward Tommy Green. Max sat obediently beside Officer Ramirez, alert but calm. Sarah felt a mixture of relief, awe, and growing anticipation. The trial had shifted from routine testimony to an extraordinary demonstration of instinct and memory, and she knew the story was only beginning. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun had climbed higher, casting its light into the courtroom, highlighting the tension, anticipation, and drama unfolding inside. Within those walls, the small gestures of a child and the precise actions of a canine had begun to change the course of justice. Sarah's testimony, now intertwined with Ethan's instinct and Max's training, had captured the attention of everyone present. She understood, in that moment, that ordinary people herself, her toddler, and a dog were participating in something extraordinary, something that would resonate far beyond that courtroom. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on the unusual scene unfolding before them. Sarah Matthews sat at the witness stand, Ethan clinging to her side, tiny fingers still pointing insistently at Tommy Green. Max, the K9, remained poised beside Officer Ramirez, his muscles coiled in alertness, tail stiff, ears forward. The connection between the toddler's intuition and the dog's trained instincts had created a tense energy that seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. Even the seasoned court personnel leaned forward slightly, aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Officer Ramirez made a subtle hand gesture, signaling Max to perform a controlled observation. The dog moved carefully toward Tommy Green's belongings, sniffing deliberately, nostrils flaring. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Sarah felt her chest tighten, each heartbeat echoing the anticipation in the room. Ethan babbled softly, him, repeating his insistence, as if urging Max to confirm what his small mind already knew. The synergy between the toddler and the K9 was uncanny, almost magical, yet grounded in real training and instinct. Max circled the defendant's personal effects, lingering over a backpack and a coat draped over the chair. His body tensed, muscles rigid but controlled, tail lowering slightly as a subtle alert. Officer Ramirez noted the response carefully, his expression unreadable, but eyes sharp, focused. This was the moment that could validate Sarah's testimony in a way no human witness alone could. The court seemed to lean forward collectively, every person present understanding the significance of the dog's behavior. Even the judge's normally stoic expression softened, revealing a flicker of curiosity and intrigue. The prosecutor seized the moment, standing slightly from her seat. Your Honor, the K9's response, in combination with the child's indication, is highly significant, she stated clearly, her voice firm but calm. It provides corroboration for the witness's identification and aligns with the sequence of events described during the testimony. The defense lawyer, realizing that conventional strategies might falter against this unusual but compelling evidence, rose sharply. Objection. This is circumstantial at best. A toddler's pointing and a dog's reaction cannot serve as reliable evidence. The judge regarded the defense calmly, raising a hand to quiet the objection. The court acknowledges the objection, he said deliberately. However, K9 responses are recognized in law enforcement as a form of behavioral evidence, and the child's behavior may be considered in context with the dog's reaction and the witness's testimony. The jury will weigh all of this accordingly. The room fell silent again, tension mounting as everyone processed the implications. This unusual pairing, a toddler's instinct and a trained police dog, was reshaping the courtroom dynamics. Sarah's pulse raced as she continued recounting the night of the burglary. She described the man's movements with precision, the shuffle of his worn shoes, the glint of a watch in dim light, the abrupt noise of a window latch snapping shut. Each detail was punctuated by Ethan's repeated pointing, his small voice interjecting with clarity. Him! Max's subtle alerts mirrored every motion of Ethan's tiny finger, creating a remarkable alignment that seemed almost choreographed. The courtroom watched, mesmerized by this improbable convergence of human memory, instinct, and trained behavior. The jurors exchanged glances, whispering softly among themselves. Some nodded subtly, as if acknowledging the compelling nature of the evidence presented. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated by the unusual dynamic. The media present in the room captured every moment, the cameras clicking relentlessly, ensuring that this extraordinary scene would not be forgotten. Even the defense team appeared unsettled, struggling to maintain composure in the face of a scenario they could not easily dismiss. Sarah felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. She had prepared to testify, relying on her memory alone, but Ethan and Max had changed the narrative entirely. The small boy's instinct had unlocked details she had long forgotten, while the dog's trained behavior confirmed their relevance. It was a rare and powerful alignment that few could explain, yet all could see. She glanced down at Ethan, whose tiny face was illuminated by focus and determination, unaware of the attention he was drawing from every adult in the courtroom. Officer Ramirez subtly guided Max toward another item, a pair of gloves left on a nearby chair. The dog's response was immediate, alerting once again. The prosecutor leaned forward slightly, pointing out the alignment of evidence. This controlled behavior demonstrates a clear link between the suspect and the items involved in the crime. Combined with the witness's testimony and the child's identification, it presents compelling corroboration. The defense shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing that the combination of evidence was difficult to counter with standard arguments. Ethan, still on Sarah's lap, waved his small arms and pointed emphatically, repeating, "Him! Him!" Each gesture seemed to guide Max, reinforcing the significance of the dog's alert. Sarah marveled at the scene. Her toddler, unaware of the weight of the moment, was helping confirm details she herself had struggled to recall. Max, disciplined and precise, responded without hesitation, embodying the bridge between instinct and trained expertise. The courtroom was captivated by the extraordinary demonstration, everyone realizing that ordinary human observation alone would not suffice to explain the scene. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jurors whispered again, eyes darting between Sarah, Ethan, Max, and Tommy Green. The defendant's confidence seemed to waver, his normally composed expression showing cracks of uncertainty. The defense lawyer attempted another line of questioning, but it was clear that the scene before them, the toddler's pointing and the canine's confirmation, was shaping the narrative in ways that undermined their strategy. Even reporters paused mid-sentence, recognizing the significance of this unusual alliance of instinct and training. Sarah continued her testimony, now recounting even more minute details: the angle of the hallway light, the specific placement of objects, and the fleeting expression on Tommy Green's face as he moved through her home. Each memory seemed sharpened by Ethan's repeated pointing, while Max's subtle alerts validated every nuance. The courtroom was witnessing something extraordinary, a rare convergence of memory, intuition, and law enforcement expertise that no one could ignore. The air was charged with anticipation, every heartbeat synchronized to the tension of the moment. Finally, Officer Ramirez directed Max to a controlled alert near the door where Tommy Green had exited during the burglary. The dog responded immediately, sitting calmly but with unmistakable intent, signaling recognition without aggression. The courtroom collectively exhaled, the magnitude of the moment settling over everyone present. Sarah glanced down at Ethan, whose small eyes sparkled with innocence and focus, unaware of the crucial role he had played in confirming the alignment of memory and evidence. The prosecutor nodded subtly, recognizing the power of the moment to reinforce the credibility of her witness. The judge allowed a brief recess to allow all parties to process the scene. Sarah adjusted Ethan on her lap, whispering gently, "You're amazing, baby. You've been so brave." Ethan yawned and leaned against her, still pointing faintly, as though confirming what he had already done. Max returned to Officer Ramirez's side, calm but vigilant. The extraordinary alignment between toddler, mother, and trained K9 had created an undeniable shift in the dynamics of the trial. Everyone present understood that what they had witnessed was rare, perhaps once in a lifetime, and the implications were profound. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered to each other, capturing every detail for their stories. The unusual spectacle The tiny child pointing and the canine confirming was something no one could have predicted, yet everyone recognized its importance. Sarah felt a sense of relief and awe. She had come to testify as a witness, but she now realized that her son and Max had become essential participants in revealing the truth. The day had transformed from a routine legal proceeding into a remarkable testament to instinct, training, and human memory working in concert. Sarah looked down at Ethan again, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. He had no understanding of the impact of his actions, no awareness of the ripple his pointing had created. Max remained at attention, the silent enforcer of truth, and Officer Ramirez gave a small approving nod. Sarah whispered, "Thank you, baby. You helped more than you know." The courtroom was still abuzz, but a sense of inevitability settled over the proceedings. The alignment of toddler instinct, canine precision, and a mother's memory had created a moment that would forever define this trial. Justice, it seemed, had found its unlikely champions. The courtroom had settled into a tense silence after Max's controlled alert. Sarah Matthews adjusted Ethan on her lap, feeling the tiny weight of her son as he squirmed slightly, pointing occasionally in the direction of Tommy Green. The small gestures of her toddler and the precise behavior of the canine had shifted the courtroom's energy. Every detail now seemed amplified, the hushed whispers of jurors, the clicking of cameras, the watchful eyes of the judge. Sarah felt a surge of responsibility. She had come here to testify, but the burden of translating her memory into truth had become intertwined with Ethan's instinct and Max's training. As the prosecutor prepared to ask her further questions, Sarah's mind drifted back to that night, the night that had brought them here. Shadows had crept along the hallway walls, the soft creak of the floorboards echoing in the otherwise silent home. She had watched, frozen behind a door, as a figure moved with calculated precision, picking up items and examining them quickly before discarding others. The sound of a window latch snapping had pierced the quiet, and in that brief, terrifying moment, she had glimpsed a face, partially obscured, features fleeting but unmistakable in her memory. The flashback was vivid. She could recall the faint scent of leather gloves, the subtle sound of shoes scuffing against hardwood, the sharp glint of a silver watch catching the dim light from the hallway lamp. Her heart raced as she relived the fear, the helplessness, and the adrenaline that had surged through her body. Each detail had once seemed insignificant, lost in the haze of panic. But now, in the courtroom, with Ethan's pointing and Max's precise reactions, every memory felt sharpened, crystal clear, and undeniable. The prosecutor leaned forward, voice gentle yet firm. "Sarah, can you tell the court what you remember about the man you saw in your home that night?" Sarah inhaled deeply, glancing down at Ethan, who had paused his pointing for a moment, but was still alert. I remember everything now," she began. "The way he moved, the shoes he wore, the way he handled the items in my living room. I saw a glint on his wrist, a watch, and the way he looked over his shoulder, like he was checking for someone. He was cautious, but he didn't expect me to be watching." Ethan's tiny finger jerked upward again, pointing decisively at Tommy Green. "Him," he said clearly, almost as if punctuating her statement. Max responded instantly, shifting slightly, tail lowering in a controlled alert, eyes locked on the same man. The courtroom collectively exhaled. It was becoming impossible to ignore the uncanny alignment between the toddler's intuition and the canine's trained instincts. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Her memories, once fragmented and uncertain, were now confirmed and highlighted by forces she had never imagined could play a role in her testimony. The defense lawyer attempted to interject, rising sharply. "Objection, Your Honor. This is circumstantial and relies on a child's unreliable perception." The judge held up a hand, signaling him to sit. The court acknowledges your objection. However, the testimony and the corroborative behavior of a trained K-9 may be considered in the context of all evidence, he stated firmly. The murmurs in the courtroom quieted. Everyone present understood that conventional objections could not diminish the extraordinary events unfolding before them. Sarah continued, her voice growing steadier with each word. She recounted how she had initially doubted her own memory, how fear had clouded her recollection, and how Ethan's instinct had brought clarity she hadn't anticipated. She described the precise movements of the intruder, the way he had paused to examine objects, the subtle sound of clothing rustling, and the abrupt exit through the door. Each time she spoke, Ethan's pointing reinforced her statements, and Max's subtle alerts confirmed the accuracy of her narrative. The prosecutor asked Sarah to focus on the items the man had interacted with. She described a backpack, a small jewelry box, and a coat left on a chair. Max moved with deliberate precision, sniffing each item as Officer Ramirez guided him subtly. The dog's behavior was disciplined, yet unmistakably reactive, signaling familiarity and confirmation. The jurors leaned forward, captivated by the alignment of human memory, child instinct, and canine training. Even the judge appeared intrigued, leaning slightly forward, his normally composed demeanor giving way to curiosity. Flashbacks surged through Sarah's mind, triggered by the canine's subtle alerts and Ethan's pointing. She remembered the faint smell of cologne that lingered in the air, the scuff of shoes on hardwood, the nervous glance over her shoulder, and the hurried movements as he searched the room. Details that had once seemed minor now felt monumental, each confirmed by the alignment of toddler and canine behavior. It was as if her memories were being validated in real time, unlocking fragments of truth she had struggled to articulate. The defense attempted another line of questioning, trying to undermine the reliability of Sarah's memory. "Are you certain these details are accurate?" the lawyer asked sharply. "How can you be sure?" Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the courtroom on her shoulders. She glanced down at Ethan, whose tiny eyes were fixed on the defendant, finger pointed with unwavering certainty. "Yes," she said firmly. "I remember because I saw him. And now, with Ethan and Max confirming what I saw, I am certain. These memories are real, and I know what I saw that night." The room seemed to hold its collective breath as she spoke. The synergy of human memory, toddler intuition, and canine precision was undeniable. Even the jury, trained to weigh evidence impartially, leaned in, their focus unwavering. Reporters clicked cameras furiously, capturing every subtle reaction, the toddler pointing, the canine's alert, and the witness recounting the night's events with increasing clarity. The defense seemed unsettled, unable to counter the compelling visual and behavioral evidence playing out before them. Officer Ramirez gave Max a subtle command, guiding the canine toward a final controlled alert near the window the intruder had used to exit. Max responded instantly, sitting with disciplined alertness, eyes fixed on the direction of the escape. Sarah's heart pounded as she recounted the final movements of Tommy Green, the hurried steps, the glance back toward the room, the abrupt exit. Ethan, small and focused, pointed one last time, his tiny voice whispering insistently, "Him." The courtroom was captivated by the scene. The alignment of instinct, memory, and training impossible to ignore. Sarah felt a wave of relief and validation. She had come to the courtroom prepared to testify based solely on memory. But the presence of her son and Max had elevated her account, transforming fragmented recollections into a coherent and compelling narrative. Each detail, once blurred by fear and uncertainty, was now confirmed and emphasized by the subtle yet precise actions of two unlikely witnesses, a toddler and a trained canine. The judge allowed a brief recess to let the courtroom absorb the extraordinary events. Sarah adjusted Ethan on her lap, whispering, "You've been amazing, baby. So brave." Ethan yawned, still pointing faintly in the same direction, as if affirming the events he had helped clarify. Max returned to Officer Ramirez's side, calm but vigilant, the silent enforcer of truth. Outside, reporters whispered eagerly, recognizing that what they had witnessed was extraordinary. The alignment of human memory, instinct, and trained behavior, a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Sarah's mind was still reeling from the intensity of the session. She realized that her own memories, previously fragmented and uncertain, had become whole again through the unusual collaboration of her son's instinct and Max's canine precision. The courtroom would remember this day, not just for the testimony, but for the remarkable alignment of forces that had made the truth impossible to ignore. Justice, it seemed, had found its unlikely champions in the smallest and most disciplined of allies. The courtroom had been suspended in tense anticipation for over an hour. Sarah Matthews adjusted Ethan on her lap, feeling the tiny weight of her son and the responsibility that came with it. Every juror's gaze was fixed on the unusual scene before them. A toddler pointing insistently at Tommy Green. A trained canine reacting with precise, disciplined alerts. And a mother recounting details that had once seemed too fragmented to form a coherent narrative. The convergence of instinct, memory, and training had already transformed the trial, and now it was reaching its pivotal moment. The prosecutor, sensing the opportunity to solidify the case, leaned forward slightly, careful to maintain courtroom decorum. "Sarah, can you describe any additional details that could help the jury understand what happened that night?" Sarah drew a deep breath, glancing down at Ethan, who had once again pointed decisively at the defendant. "I remember the way he moved," she began, her voice steadier now, fortified by the validation of Ethan's instinct and Max's canine behavior. He was careful but nervous. I saw him check over his shoulder multiple times, and he touched certain items in a way that suggested he knew exactly what he was looking for. Ethan's tiny voice interjected, "Him. Him, Mommy." His finger pointed unwaveringly at Tommy Green. Max shifted subtly, muscles tensing, ears forward, tail stiff but controlled. Officer Ramirez gave a small nod, silently acknowledging the dog's alert and its significance. The courtroom fell silent, the collective attention of jurors, reporters, and court personnel fully captured by this extraordinary alignment of memory and instinct. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, his expression revealing the rare mix of curiosity and astonishment reserved for moments that defy expectation. The defense lawyer attempted to regain control, rising sharply. "Objection, Your Honor. This is circumstantial and relies on a toddler's behavior, which is inherently unreliable." The judge raised a hand, signaling the objection noted, but overruled in part. "The court recognizes the objection," he said calmly. "But the combination of a witness's memory, corroborated by trained canine behavior and observed child behavior, may be considered by the jury in context." The lawyer's shoulders sagged slightly as he realized that conventional arguments could not easily counter this extraordinary convergence of testimony and instinct. Sarah's mind replayed the burglary in vivid detail. She remembered the scuff of shoes against the hardwood floor, the rustle of clothing, the subtle glint of a silver watch, the nervous glance over her shoulder. Each memory, once blurred by fear and panic, now emerged with crystalline clarity, amplified by Ethan's instinctive pointing and Max's disciplined alerts. She spoke slowly, deliberately, painting a picture for the jury that aligned perfectly with the physical evidence and the canine's behavior. The prosecutor gently guided Sarah to the items the intruder had handled. "Can you describe the specific objects and their placement?" Sarah nodded. There was a backpack near the window, a coat draped over the chair, and a jewelry box on the shelf. He handled them quickly, as if searching for something, then left the room the way he came. Ethan's small finger pointed at the backpack, then at the coat, and finally at Tommy Green himself. Max moved deliberately to the same items, sniffing carefully and signaling a controlled alert. The courtroom collectively held its breath. The defense lawyer, growing increasingly flustered, attempted another line of questioning. How can you be sure this man is the one you saw that night? You only caught a glimpse of him. Sarah's gaze hardened. I am sure, she said firmly. And now, Ethan's pointing and Max's behavior confirm it. I remember clearly, and the evidence aligns perfectly with what I saw. The jury's expressions shifted, some nodded subtly. Others leaned forward, captivated by the unprecedented validation of a witness's memory through a toddler's instinct and a trained canine. A flashback struck Sarah like lightning. She could see the intruder in her living room, glancing quickly at the window, the soft rustle of his jacket as he handled the items, the anxious way he moved. She remembered the glint of the silver watch, the faint scent of leather gloves, the shuffle of worn shoes. Every detail now corresponded with Ethan's gestures and Max's alerts, forming a complete and undeniable picture. The prosecution seized the opportunity to emphasize the alignment. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said, her voice steady but compelling. What you are witnessing is rare but powerful. A mother's memory, once clouded by fear, is now validated by the instinct of a child and the trained precision of a K9. This alignment provides strong corroboration of the suspect's presence and actions in the home. The courtroom was silent, the words hanging in the air, reinforcing the extraordinary scene that had unfolded. Ethan, sensing the rising tension, pointed once more, tiny voice firm. Him. Max responded immediately, shifting slightly and lowering his head in a controlled alert. The jurors exchanged glances, the weight of the moment sinking in. The defendant, previously confident, now appeared uneasy. His composure faltered under the combined scrutiny of witness testimony, child instinct, and canine validation. The defense lawyer whispered urgently, but it was clear that the courtroom dynamic had shifted irreversibly. The judge allowed Officer Ramirez to demonstrate Max's trained responses. The K9 approached the items again, sniffing deliberately, then signaled alert near the exit the intruder had used. Sarah's heart pounded. Ethan pointed to the same location, small voice rising again. Him, Mommy. The alignment was undeniable. Sarah realized in that instant that the convergence of her memory, her son's instinct, and Max's training had formed a near irrefutable chain of confirmation. The room seemed suspended in awe, each participant acutely aware that justice had found unlikely yet formidable allies. The prosecutor guided Sarah to recount the intruder's exit. She described the hurried, tense movements, the glance back toward the room, and the abrupt disappearance through the door. Ethan's gestures and Max's precise response amplified the clarity of her memory. Even the judge appeared momentarily captivated by the unusual but compelling scene. The jurors' expressions shifted again, some nodding subtly, others whispering quietly, captivated by the extraordinary validation of the witness's account. Then, the moment came that would define the trial. The prosecutor asked Sarah to identify the suspect unequivocally. Ethan's finger shot straight toward Tommy Green, small voice rising. Him! Max reacted instantly, muscles tensing, eyes locked on the defendant, tail stiff but controlled. The combination of toddler instinct, mother's memory, and trained canine behavior created a tableau that left no room for ambiguity. The courtroom was silent, the significance of the alignment impossible to ignore. The defense lawyer attempted a final objection, but the judge's measured gaze cut through the interruption. The objection is noted, he said, but the jury is free to consider the totality of evidence, including witness testimony, child behavior, and canine observations. The courtroom exhaled collectively. The extraordinary combination of human memory, instinct, and trained expertise having left an indelible impression on everyone present. Sarah adjusted Ethan, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You've been amazing, baby," she whispered softly. Ethan smiled faintly, oblivious to the impact of his gestures, still pointing occasionally, his instinctive clarity guiding Max's trained responses. The courtroom had witnessed something extraordinary, a rare alignment of forces that had made the truth undeniable. Justice had been shaped not by fear or intimidation, but by the innocence of a child, the precision of a canine, and the unwavering memory of a mother determined to tell the truth. Outside the courtroom, the murmurs of reporters captured the scene for history. The unusual convergence of toddler instinct and canine training was unprecedented, yet it had provided a critical validation of Sarah's testimony. Within the courtroom, the tension remained palpable, but a sense of inevitability settled over the proceedings. The extraordinary alignment of memory, instinct, and training had revealed what ordinary observation alone could not, and the stage was set for the final resolution of the case. The courtroom was silent, heavy with anticipation. The extraordinary testimony, the toddler's instinct, and Max's trained precision had transformed the trial into something unprecedented. Sarah Matthews sat, Ethan cradled gently on her lap, small fingers still occasionally pointing, a subtle reminder of the role he had played in validating her memory. Max, disciplined and poised, remained beside Officer Ramirez, eyes alert, tail controlled, yet exuding calm authority. The jurors leaned forward, their faces tense, absorbing every detail, aware that what they had witnessed could decisively influence their verdict. The judge adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat, signaling that closing arguments would commence. The prosecutor rose, voice calm yet compelling, summarizing the extraordinary convergence of evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what you have witnessed is rare, but undeniable. A mother's memory, initially fragmented and clouded by fear, has been confirmed in real time by the intuitive actions of her toddler and the trained behavior of a canine. This alignment validates her account of the intruder's movements, the items he handled, and his presence in her home." She paused, letting the words sink in, the weight of the moment pressing down on every listener. The defense lawyer rose immediately, voice sharp, attempting to counter the narrative. "Members of the jury, you have heard a compelling story, but you must remember, a toddler's pointing is not evidence, and a dog's behavior, while trained, cannot replace verified forensic evidence. Circumstantial observations cannot serve as proof beyond a reasonable doubt." He looked toward Tommy Green, whose expression had shifted from confident composure to uncertainty. The judge nodded slightly, acknowledging the objection without interrupting the final presentation. Sarah watched Ethan as he squirmed gently on her lap, his small eyes focused on the man who had invaded their home. She marveled at how instinct, memory, and training had converged to create an extraordinary force for truth. Each time Ethan pointed, Max's subtle alerts confirmed the alignment, reinforcing the credibility of her recollection. The courtroom had become a stage for something extraordinary, a testament to the power of perception, intuition, and preparation in a single, unbroken moment. The prosecutor continued, emphasizing the specific details of the burglary that had been corroborated by the toddler and the canine. She described how Sarah had recalled the sound of the intruder's shoes scuffing across the floor, the faint glint of a silver watch, the precise movements as he examined her belongings. Ethan, in his innocence, pointed to the suspect with clarity, she explained, and Max's trained response mirrored that identification precisely. This is not coincidence. It is confirmation. It is evidence. The jurors exchanged subtle glances, leaning forward, the impact of the unusual testimony sinking in. The defense attempted one last effort to sow doubt, questioning the reliability of a toddler's memory. Can a 2-year-old truly identify someone with certainty? This is a child unaware of the proceedings, incapable of understanding the weight of his gestures. Sarah took a deep breath, gripping Ethan gently. Her voice was steady, filled with conviction. He may be small, but his instincts are real. And Max's behavior confirms the truth. I know what I saw. This is not imagination. This is real. The courtroom remained silent, the weight of her words reinforced by the unusual but undeniable alignment of child instinct, memory, and trained canine behavior. The judge called for the jury to deliberate. As the jurors filed out, murmurs filled the room. Reporters whispered to one another, cameras clicking to capture every fleeting expression. The defense and prosecution conferred quietly, each aware that the extraordinary events had shifted the dynamics of the trial. Sarah felt her chest tighten, anxiety mingling with hope. Ethan, oblivious to the gravity, yawned softly, leaning against her, occasionally pointing toward the defendant, as if affirming the truth he had already helped reveal. Max remained alert beside Officer Ramirez, a silent guardian and enforcer of justice. Hours passed. The jury returned, faces solemn, the room still intense. A 4-person rose, voice steady, but carrying the weight of the moment. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Relief, awe, and satisfaction mingled in the air. Tommy Green slumped slightly in his chair, realization dawning on him. The defense lawyer murmured softly, defeated, as the courtroom absorbed the verdict. Sarah felt her knees weaken slightly, relief washing over her. She glanced down at Ethan, small face glowing with innocence, still pointing subtly, and whispered, "We did it, baby. We did it." Officer Ramirez gave Max a subtle nod of approval, and the dog responded by sitting calmly, obedient and disciplined. The alignment of toddler instinct and canine precision had played a pivotal role in confirming Sarah's memory and guiding the jury toward justice. The courtroom erupted in subdued murmurs as the gravity of the verdict sank in. The mother, the child, and the canine had become unlikely champions, each contributing in a unique way to the realization of justice. Sarah stepped down from the witness stand, carrying Ethan, feeling the weight of emotion pressing down. Tears threatened, but she held them back, smiling softly at the small boy who had unknowingly helped shape the outcome. Reporters crowded forward, cameras flashing, eager to capture the moment. But Sarah's focus remained on Ethan and Max. She whispered softly, "Thank you, both of you. You helped more than you know." Ethan giggled softly, small finger still pointing faintly, while Max remained poised beside Officer Ramirez, the silent sentinel of truth. The news of the trial's extraordinary proceedings spread rapidly. Outside the courthouse, crowds of people gathered. Journalists spoke urgently into cameras, and headlines captured the unique combination of mother, toddler, and canine. The story resonated with readers and viewers everywhere, a testament to the power of instinct, courage, and truth. Sarah and Ethan returned home that evening, exhausted but buoyed by relief. Max, still with Officer Ramirez, had completed his role in the day's extraordinary events, but his presence had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed the trial. As the Matthews family settled back into their home, Sarah reflected on the journey. Fear and uncertainty had once clouded her memory, leaving her anxious about testifying. Yet, through the instinctive guidance of Ethan and the disciplined precision of Max, clarity had emerged. Justice had been served, not by chance, but through the extraordinary alignment of human perception, innocence, and training. Sarah held Ethan close, marveling at how her small child, in combination with Max, had helped turn the tide of the trial, ensuring that truth prevailed. Weeks later, Sarah received a call from Officer Ramirez. "Max and I will always remember that day," he said warmly. "The alignment between your testimony, Ethan's instincts, and Max's training was remarkable. It doesn't happen often, and it made all the difference." Sarah smiled, voice soft but full of gratitude. "We couldn't have done it without both of you. Ethan might not remember, but I never will." The officer chuckled softly. "And Max doesn't forget either. Good job, team." In the quiet of her home, Sarah tucked Ethan into bed that night, whispering, "You were amazing today, baby. So brave, so smart." Ethan yawned, eyes closing, tiny finger pointing once more at nothing in particular, a subtle echo of the instinct that had helped shape justice. Sarah smiled, tears of relief and pride streaming silently down her face. Max, through his handler, had played an equally vital role, and the courtroom's extraordinary events would remain a story to be told for years, a story of courage, instinct, and the unlikely champions who helped ensure that truth prevailed. The trial concluded, the verdict delivered, and justice served. But for Sarah Matthews, Ethan, and Officer Ramirez with Max, the day had become more than a legal proceeding. It had become a testament to the power of instinct, memory, and determination. It was a reminder that even the smallest among us, when guided by courage and reinforced by truth, can shape the outcome of events in ways no one could predict. And as Ethan drifted to sleep, finger resting gently on the sheets, Sarah knew that the extraordinary bond between a mother, her child, and a loyal K-9 had forever changed the course of their lives.